It's election day in the United States to determine some key local and state races in the country, with the mayoral race in New York City receiving an outsized amount of attention, including from President Donald Trump. The race could make history by electing the clear frontrunner, the Ugandan-born Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani, who could become the first Muslim mayor of New York. But he's up against a formidable former State Governor Andrew Cuomo, who, after losing the Democratic primary to Mamdani in June, is now running as an independent, while Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa is unlikely to prevail in deep blue New York City. President Trump last night endorsed Andrew Cuomo for the race in an effort to blunt Mamdani's trajectory.
President Trump also encouraged every New Yorker to vote for Andrew Cuomo. There are many things that he will say and that he will do that will not actually bear out in the results within our own, necessarily the law of the land. And too often we treat anything that he says, by virtue of who's saying it, as if it is already that law. And it is time that we have a mayor who stands up for New Yorkers each and every day, not one who's willing to sacrifice those New Yorkers so that they can stand up for themselves.
You're seeing a civil war in the Democratic Party that has been brewing for a while. You have an extreme radical left that is run by the socialists, that is challenging what they would call moderate Democrats. I'm a moderate Democrat. And that contest is what you're seeing here, but you're seeing it all across the country. Every time the Republican Party had a chance from the far right, the Tea Party, and the moderates pushed back the challenge from the Tea Party. This is the inverse. You have the far socialist left challenging the moderates. I'm a Democrat like Mario Cuomo, like Bill Clinton, like Barack Obama, like John Kennedy, like their grandfather, their other grandfather, Robert Kennedy. That's my school of Democratic politics, and that's what I'm fighting to preserve.
For more now, we speak to US Correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who is monitoring this and other local and state races around the country. Sherwin, there are governor races taking place in New Jersey and Virginia, quite important races that one would say is equally as much a referendum on Donald Trump as the New York races. But why is it that the New York race has received so much attention, disproportionately so?
Because an outsider born in Uganda, who has framed his campaign around democratic socialism. His vision is for free public transportation, for universal childcare, city-run grocery stores, and taxing the most wealthy New Yorkers and corporations to pay for that is seen as antithetical to the nuances of capitalism that really frames the United States writ large. You have this insurgent, if you will, someone who's a New York State Assemblyman since 2001 and really hasn't managed a big corporation or a big company, to the extent that Andrew Cuomo has, who served as New York governor, comes from one of the dynastic Democratic families in New York State. His father, Mario Cuomo, who he mentioned in that clip alongside Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, was a three-time governor of New York State. He was the state Secretary of State before that. So very deep Democratic roots when you talk about Andrew Cuomo in terms of New York State, New York City politics. And the polling here is showing Mamdani running away with this race. So as much as Cuomo is trying to sort of assert himself as a moderate Democrat, what you are seeing in terms of the polling, what you are seeing in terms of the Democratic primary that nominated Mamdani, which Cuomo lost in June and is now subsequently running as an independent, the push here you are seeing in the main, Oliver, from young voters, is that this is about an affordability crisis. This is a Mamdani that is speaking to that affordability crisis. And as we speak right now, the polling is showing him with an either 7 to 26-point lead. So he could really run away with this tonight. But of course, as you well know, Donald Trump inserting himself overnight and endorsing Cuomo in an effort to blunt, as you correctly pointed out, the trajectory of Mamdani here. But those are the elements at play here. There's an affordability crisis in one of the wealthiest cities in the world, but also one of the most expensive cities in the world. And this is someone in Mamdani that is seeking to arrest that. And of course, Cuomo comes from the more establishment vein of what the Democrats Democratic Party represents in the United States.
We often say that Mamdani is Ugandan born, which he is, but we seem to forget that he also lived in Cape Town, in South Africa, as a child with his filmmaker mom and academic father before relocating to the US. I think South Africa should want to have to say something about that. I'm fascinated about turnout here, Sherwin, because Mamdani has campaigned in ways that I don't think I've ever seen a candidate campaign in the US. Just over the last couple of days, we've seen Mamdani after midnight club hop and in fact visited a gay bar to campaign inside of that, which is something I genuinely have not seen anyone else besides maybe Alexandria Cortez do so a little bit, but not to the extent Mamdani has. And he certainly has redefined what the role social media can play is in US elections. He's been very astute at that. We saw more than 740,000 early votes being cast. And it's just about, almost 4 p.m. In New York City right now. Do we have any indication what turnout figures will and are looking like?
We don't know, but there are millions of people that live in New York, and millions will certainly turn out. But you're right, about 735,000 people voted in early voting, and so we expect that to go into the millions. But you're quite right. You know, you mentioned a few things there in that answer, right? In that question, you talked about the little bit of time he spent in South Africa from the age of 5 and 7 when his father was teaching at the University of Cape Town. Ugandan born, went to a nightclub to canvass support there, or to at least show up. But I'll tell you, he's also been to churches. He's also been to mosques. And I think it speaks to the fact that he's a young guy. He's 34 years old. He's a first-term States Assembly person. His base is the young electorate in New York City. So he's very much speaking to that audience, to that voting bloc. But also, I think it speaks to his diversity, right? He is a multilingual. He speaks not only English, he speaks Arabic, he speaks fluent Spanish, he speaks Hindi, he speaks Urdu. So this is someone that comes from a multicultural background, that has traveled the world, has a father who's an academic, a mother who's a filmmaker. And so I think it is emblematic of how he has run this campaign, so much so that he got a call from Barack Obama, the former US president, who in many ways kind of, the two have remind each other about how they've run their campaigns. Remember, Barack Obama was the Hope and Change candidate, and that very much is what Mamdani is putting forward here, and saying to him he's very proud of the campaign that he's run here. And so he's been very adept at using social media, really adept at connecting with voters in all the boroughs. When presented with a question in one of the first debates about, which country he would travel to first, would he go to Israel first? And his response was that his priority was going to all the boroughs of New York. And I think that in and of itself is a response that New Yorkers are unfamiliar with, because all the other candidates asserted, that they would go to Israel. And he was kind of bucking the trend, because he's not the mayor of Tel Aviv, he's the wants to be the mayor of New York City.
That's a really important point, because New York is home to more than 2,000 Jewish Americans, and more importantly there, Mamdani, I think a day or two ago, had received an endorsement by the largest grouping of rabbis in New York City. A few hours ago, Donald Trump had tweeted that, or at least on a post on Truth Social, that any Jewish person who votes for Mamdani is a self-hating Jew. And I'm assuming they're concomitantly anti-Semitic. And of course, Andrew Cuomo has tried to brand Mamdani as being anti-Semitic. How important and pivotal and emblematic was that endorsement by a large grouping of Jewish rabbis in Mamdani's campaign in the last few days?
I think it very much speaks to how the Jewish vote is going to be split in this election. There are certainly younger Jewish people, maybe a younger group of rabbis endorsing Mamdani, but there is certainly, I've seen a number of rabbis from New York City make the case as to why Mamdani should be rejected. And certainly this is something that Andrew Cuomo has really focused on in terms of his campaign. But this is going to be, the Jewish vote, we understand, in terms of the polling, is going to be very split in terms of Mamdani. He's winning a sizable number of Jewish voters here in New York City, which is one of the, a city with one of the largest Jewish populations anywhere in the world outside of Israel. But this is a very multicultural city. There are immigrants in New York City from all over the world. This is not just a Jewish-centric city. There are people from all around the world. There are people, the United Nations is based here. And so New York, in many ways, is very much a set apart, if you will, Oliver, from other parts of the country. There are races in all sorts of mayoral races around the country, states races, and to make the case that somehow electing Mamdani is somehow representative of where the Democratic Party is writ large in the United States, I think is a misnomer, because New York is very specific in who New York is going to vote for, and I'm sure Kansas City or some rural town in Montana is going to make a different choice based on the circumstances that are presented to them there. What New York is facing right now is an affordability crisis. It is very expensive to have children in New York City. It is very expensive to send your children to school in New York City. If you're not one of the lucky ones to get sort of free education at one of the top public schools, which is an option, but very selective, and there's a great deal of competition to get there. There's a lot of stress with living in New York, especially if you're in the bottom rung of society, in the bottom economic rung of society, and that is something that he wants to address. But understand also that campaigning and presenting your vision to an electorate, which they then assimilate to or not, is the first step. You then get elected, and then governing is, of course, where the rubber hits the road. And so whatever coalition he is able to engender in this process, how big his victory here is going to be very informative, or certainly is going to present a pathway to how other electoral officials, the New York State Governor, members of the City Council are going to react. If he wins big, there will be such a huge mandate here that they are going to have to get on board in terms of this vision. But in terms of, for example, raising taxes on the wealthy to pay for free buses or to pay for universal childcare or for city-run grocery stores, you're going to need intervention from the state legislature in Albany. So the governor's role in terms of increasing taxes is going to be pivotal. So the type of mandate Mamdani gets is going to be is certainly going to inform how other elected politicians in the state are going to react and how they are going to be able to help him implement this agenda or not, of course, or not is a very important point to make there.
It seems to have the support of Governor Hochul on that agenda as far as the taxations are concerned. We're going to have to leave it there, Sherwin. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. We're going to take a break. On the other side of this, we continue.